What's going on, everyone? We got an interesting video here by Digital Foundry saying at what point did Xbox lose the current gen console war? Well, one thing I have to tell you guys is that it started by losing the Xbox One war. And what do I mean by that? The digital carryover. Phil Spencer mentioned that too, that once you lose that digital carryover, it's over. And that's what I was trying to tell people about the Wii U delusion with the Switch and the Switch 2, which, like, you do realize that they have the biggest digital carryover in gaming history, 157 million install base. It's an automatic victory conversion. There's nothing you can do about that. The best thing Microsoft could have done was continue to stay pro-consumer and do the best that they could and drop the prices and just follow that route, but they didn't do that. So there's no way they could have ever won this generation. It's not possible, but they could have made it a lot more pro-consumer than Sony, but they didn't even do that for the long term. So let's get in here and see what else they messed up on to where we could realize they could have been in a better position. Let's go.
Ray tracing. Hi, Digital Foundry! Exclamation point. With the perspective we now have this generation of consoles, why do you think Xbox Series lost so much of its market to PlayStation 5? Neither brand shipped poor hardware design. The Series S was the cheapest, and this console generation has so few exclusives! Exclamation point. Even before
Yeah.
everything became an Xbox, I was wondering why they lost the console
Oh,
war of
God.
this generation so badly. Well, Phil Spencer himself has talked in the past about how going into this generation, they were badly set up because the whole digital library thing happened last generation and Sony basically
Mhm.
won that. But I think there's more to it than
Mm,
that, right, John?
There is.
I don't think that excuse holds water completely because the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017,
Fair point, but
and
it's a different type of product, isn't it?
no, and that's my point, is it had a selling point that to differentiate itself, which was the portable hybrid play, right?
Yeah.
Xbox and PlayStation are just the same things
Yep.
from different companies. They are. Right down to the hardware inside. They're virtually the same. And I think
Hmm.
that is why they've struggled, because they didn't find, neither one found a way to differentiate from one another. And since they're the same basic product, I think in that case, I see where he's coming from when he says they lost that battle with the online space, because there was nothing about Xbox that made it special to the masses.
Yeah, he's right about that because you already had Game Pass on PC. And if you look at what you're offering, Sony has market lead. They had the 100% automatic conversion. They had the next gen games. They had no next gen games. They had an identity. I try to tell people it's the identity crisis plus the conversion. So because you have no identity to make it special to where somebody wants to be with you, and you're saying I can do this somewhere else and do the same thing, then why would somebody stay or pay attention to you? They're going to go to the more powerful exclusive identity. And they have power, they have light, you know what I mean? And Microsoft just doesn't have any. Everything just dies off no matter what they monopolize. It tanks down too. All metas tank down, all series tank down, and everything could be played on the Pro. Everything can be played on PC on higher settings. Where is your identity and reason to stay there? There wasn't no reason. People just wanted to carry over, but then even then they made it worse and worse. So I mean, it's a combination of Sony winning that, Don Matrick doing that, no exclusive identity, betraying your base, and just consistently making dumb choices. I mean, it's just embarrassing. And yeah, no hardware innovation. Like I said, what's the point?
Over what PlayStation has. And then you kind of look at it, Sony still had that mind share of the bigger first party titles that were more celebrated, that got more like I guess general public attention, but in addition to much better Japanese support. And I think those two factors, just kind of, people would say, well, I got these two products that are basically the same. I'll go with the one that has a bit more of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really that simple, which is why I think that was ultimately why one of them, I mean, in this case, Microsoft, they really needed to find a better option that wasn't just another console that was the same thing, because clearly that ship has sailed for this sort of thing. I don't know what that would have been. I don't know what they could have done earlier. I guess they kind of went all in on the subscription stuff as like the differentiator, right? But I think that maybe have backfired for them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so maybe what they're trying to do now is what could help them there. I don't know. It really remains to be seen, but I think
He's right. It's the same thing again. Like you try the TV stuff, the DRM lockdown, everything they do, it's way too early and it's not the right move and it's not a market. It's just like Sony trying to get the VR, you know what I mean? Dude, it's too early. And even then it's a tough market. No matter what they try to make it too, and then they got the people coming in to pair to make it seem like it's gonna work, but it's like the reality is you're delusional in a bubble fantasy with like 2% of the gaming population agreeing with you on that side. And the rest of the 96, 97, 98%, if there's more than 2% at a time, just don't care and they're not going to pay attention. And I think that is the problem with the Xbox space that they never realize. It just looks like some lunatic code. This keeps trying to mass project and then negatively point angles at other platforms that are winning. Then you want to call them an Xbox too. You just look like there's no intelligence there.
I think it is just about finding something that differentiates because, again, all the Switch did really, the Switch really is just like the Wii U, but truly portable.
Right.
The Wii U was a gigantic failure for Nintendo, and you have to think about why. And I mean, I think just the hardware was clunky.
They confused the market too. Some people were probably thinking there was like some like optional upgrade or something. It was just a bad name. It was stupid to try to keep you not fully portable. You could just go around anywhere. They made some mistakes with that too, for sure. But they'll never make that mistake again. But 100%, just like Sony made that mistake with the Vita, not putting the L2 and R2 in the back and not having much support for it. They both made dumb mistakes, but the mistakes Microsoft makes, I mean, they can't recover.
There was a lot of just like things about it that made it unappealing and confusing to the masses.
Yeah, they confuse people.
Some people thought it was just like an extension of the Wii.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that they did wrong there with the way they presented it and they presented the feature set that it failed. Whereas the Switch, they made very smart decisions about how to present it as well as how to get that new feature out there. And the difference is massive, which says to me, a lot of this has to do with how you message the differences in your product and and the need to find some hook that differentiates you from the competition. Knowing that the PS4 was very strong from the last generation, Microsoft should have known this and looked at this better. And I think the idea of just more power wasn't enough anymore. So,
I mean,
100%. I don't know if you guys remember, but Layden came out recently, or was it Shuhei, and said, power is not enough for PS6. You need way more. Because it's getting to that point now, your power ain't going to work anymore. There's already enough. And everything already looks good. What do you have? Because power never won anything. No PlayStation handheld ever beat a Nintendo handheld. You see? The Series X is more powerful than the PS5. The PS3 was more powerful than the 360, and it was beating it at that time. Then they ended up dropping the price down and handling things. The Wii, I wouldn't say was more powerful than the PS3 or the 360, right? The DS, right? 154 million. Didn't Sega have certain architecture too against Nintendo? They didn't win. You know what I mean? The original Xbox One was more powerful than the PS2. That didn't mean anything. And Nintendo said after GameCube, I'll never chase power again. Because they realized that power does not win anything. As I said before, power without love and balance is pointless. It is just meaningless. So the video game industry is not about power. It never was. When you play games back then, you would never think about no power and specs. None of that existed. So that just shows you how out of touch Microsoft is, because they always try to present like this power-headed mentality. That's the problem with the PC community. They try to present like, oh, I got these specs, but what does it mean though if you don't have the games? It doesn't mean anything. You're just sitting there. Nobody's using that.
Just sort of going back to the heady days of 2020, where there was this huge. How can we describe it? Things kind of went a bit nuts, didn't they, John? To the point where we were getting death threats. Which, in retrospect,
yeah, that was a really bad time. I mean, I will say, like, the change in the way the industry has moved now has been a relief, because that sort of like bickering is largely ended.
Yeah, it's kind of anachronistic at this point. But going back to 2020, there were some issues, right? I mean, Xbox launched with a really good back compat offering, but no actual new games at launch.
Well, and then that's the thing is, like, if Sony had botched the backwards compatibility, I think that
was
actually
the thing,
would have been,
right? That was the
that
thing.
would have been one of the big things that Xbox could have pushed. But it ended up not being they ended up doing fine.
Yeah, the back compat on PS5 was basically, it didn't have any of the bells and whistles that Microsoft brought to the party. But the point is that you got the lion's share of what you would have wanted. You were able to play your games. and you were able to play them at better performance levels, which kind of, nullified that particular Microsoft advantage.
Here's my thing with that too, guys. The problem with backwards compatibility is that if I am bored of these games and you gave me a new PC upgrade or upgrade my PC, I don't care if they look better. If I don't want to play you, I'm not going to play you. Giving me better specs does not change my backwards compatibility law. If people get in this mindset, it's like, yeah, but are you playing those games? Because if I wanted to play them, I'd play them. You know what I mean? Unless there was like a huge switch to Switch 2 jump, you know what I mean? It was like, man, this game played trash and I really want better performance. That's different. But when you already got your full experience out of the game and you just never want to play that game again, it's just like telling me, oh no, I'm giving you these specs. I don't care. I don't want to play the game. You know what I mean? I have no feeling to play it. So to me, it's pointless if I'm not interested in it. That's only for a certain group of people. And then even then, how long is that candle going to hold? It's more about these new experiences that make you want to get it to where you cannot get it anywhere else, and that it has high replay value. And then you have those AAA games with that, some nice new AA games, but just new experiences. Because if you already have the specs to play the other stuff, fine. What is the point then? That's why a lot of people still stay on certain rigs for the most part, and are just getting these games to be able to play them on the settings that they could at least get their at least 50 frames or something. And with upscaling in frames, and now you can get that. So that's what I'm saying. It's now getting to the point now. Backwards compatibility has a limit, just like a new console upgrade. If you don't have anything to go with it, you know what I mean? What is the point then? There really isn't one.
And you had stuff like Demon Souls and Miles Morales. I mean, Miles Morales, I guess, wasn't a PS5 exclusive as such.
It showed off the tech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as Spider-Man.
Yeah, and you wanted to play a hot new game on the hot new piece of hardware, right?
This is the thing. I've said this argument before. It was the Halo Infinite botch.
Right.
That's what really tanked them. If they had been able to deliver that initial vision of what Halo Infinite could have been,
Agreed.
that very first teaser trailer, do that right. Make it Xbox Series exclusive. Really make it a great Halo game. Paint this as like the return of Xbox. Like market that right, and it could have been a gigantic thing for them.
Yeah.
And I think this all goes back to original Xbox even. I think the only reason the original Xbox actually succeeded at the time is because of Halo. If Halo had not been good, I think the system would have done far, far, far less. And I think it shows how much of a razor edge you're often riding with these products. You just got to get the right thing. And if it's just executed the right way and captures enough people, it can catapult you to huge success.
Well, he just said exclusive identity and exclusive power from the Bungie devs, but you lost them, and look at what happened. It's like you lost the original Gears devs and went to make Fortnite. You see? And you lost Clay Spazinski. They don't have any original developers. Peter Moore's not there for Fable. Now they're outsourcing that to the Forza team in order to get them to do things. They had to tank off that other part. You see what I mean? I tell you, that exclusive identity, that original team, that breaking apart and not working as a family and having that strong light. Yeah, Nintendo, make sure that never happens. That's going to beat you every time in game. And there's nothing you can do about it. You ain't going to be able to buy that because light is not for sale. You see what I mean? You can't buy that bond that people built up like that. You can't buy that exclusive identity. It doesn't work. Microsoft tried to buy everything. Look at them. I'm telling you, look at Nintendo sales. See what I mean? Look at those software sales. Look at PlayStation still continuing. They don't have it. And people could try to copyright it all you want, but you cannot restore that identity. It's gone. They're just going to have to find something else. There is no other method, and they can never return to consoles again. So that stuff's hard to do.
And I really think they needed a Halo, and I think that's what they were trying to do. I think that's what they wanted to do with Halo Infinite, but 343 could not deliver. And that, I think, was like a domino effect thing for the whole business.
So, Oliver, you weren't with us in 2020 and therefore avoided the death threats. What was your perspective on how this has all played out?
Well, I mean, as John mentioned, a big part of it is just the lead up into Xbox Series was not very good. Obviously, you had a bunch of bungles with the Xbox One VCR, with Kinect, with reduced hardware power. Then just coming into this generation, you had a lower density of exclusive titles coming out of the Xbox Game Studios branded studios that were producing exclusive content for PC and Xbox. And then coming into this generation, I think that you did end up seeing a pretty stark divide in terms of the quality of the software that was arriving on Xbox Series versus PlayStation 5, even though PlayStation 5 has maybe not had the highest density of high quality exclusive software relative to PS4, relative to PS3. There's still like Demon's Souls, the Spider-Man games, Rift Apart, Returnal, Forbidden West, GT7, God of War, Astrobot obviously recently, tons of games, Final Fantasy 16, tons of games that I like, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, lots of games in the mix there. Ghost of Yotei recently, lots of remasters of really highly acclaimed PS4 titles, as much as we besmirch them, as much as we don't like their priorities at times. Those games are big successes, titles like The Last of Us Part 2 remaster, titles like Ghost of Tsushima. Those are big games. On the Xbox side of things, I think you have a much more sedate schedule. Their launch titles were not very good, I would say. Just like some optimized games like Gears 5. There was like a patch for Forza Horizon 4, things like this. 2021, you had, Forza Horizon 5 in 2021 was great. Halo Infinite in 2020, or rather in 2021 was great. So was Halo Infinite. I really did enjoy Halo Infinite despite all its faults. But then there was a bit of a drought, as you might recall. In 2022, there was almost nothing into like 2023, early 2023. Then all of a sudden you have Hi-Fi Rush, a few other games. Redfall was a kind of a disaster, unfortunately. There was some, I don't need to go through the whole spiel here, but there were some really compromised efforts in there. And there was a lower density of software. And then going into early 2024, we have the infamous Just 4 Games announcement, which kind of portended the steep decline of the platform in terms of sales. I think at that point, the sales volume really probably dropped off a cliff, at least from what I can see. People were not too much into Xbox past that point. So I think that probably the game issue is a central issue that's specific to Xbox Series. Obviously, there were issues leading up to Xbox Series that hurt the Xbox brand quite dramatically. And then I think there are some feedback loops where when you start to lose market share, maybe your shelf space, retailers are not allocating as much shelf space. You're not getting promoted as much. Maybe your gamer friends are telling you, oh, just get a PS5. Let's play this game together. Let's play, this new title together. Let's enjoy this platform together. And then at the same time, Microsoft was not nearly as aggressive as Sony was with marketing their consoles with big sales, with big, deep discounts. Sony was trying to push a PS5 on you pretty aggressively into 2022, 2023, 2024. They were bundling the consoles aggressively with sales. They were cutting prices by $50 or $100. They really wanted to move PS5 consoles, and they still want to move PS5 consoles. They've still been pretty good about keeping the price within reasonable bounds. And you look at Microsoft, who are subject to similar constraints with tariffs and things like this. They've simply chosen to maintain their margins and increase prices in the wake of those tariffs, whereas Sony is trying to still fight it out for every possible margin of market share, which shows a different attitude in pushing consoles and a much more aggressive attitude that's been much more successful.
100%. Let me know what you guys think about this. Like, comment, subscribe. As usual, Sony outsmarts them. They're more pro-consumer with their choices, even though they probably don't want to be in those situations, but they still do it. And they have way less money. They have no $4 trillion market cap. They don't even have 500 billion market cap. You see what I mean? It just shows how much of a scumbag company Microsoft is. Later, y'all.